We are often asked to solve multi-part word problems. Sometimes they appear in different sections with Part A, Part B, and Part C. Today, we are going to be solving Part A with this video. You will solve Part B by yourself after we complete this video. Let's read the directions together. Solve the multi-part problem below using the writer strategy. Let's take a look at the writer strategy. The acronym WRITER helps us solve word problems, often that have multiple parts. These steps help guide our thinking so that we can identify the strategies that we will use. WRITER also helps us use models efficiently and evaluate if the answer we have found is reasonable. We start the writer strategy by saying R. Read and annotate the question. Let's begin. If you do not have a paper in front of you, you need to get one. On your paper, you will draw a line down and a line across about 2/3 to 3/4 of the way down your page. We will begin by R. Reading and annotating the question. If you had a piece of paper, you would write the letter R next to the question. Part A. It takes the custodian 13 minutes to clean each dough mixing machine and 9 minutes to clean each conveyor belt. There are 7 dough mixing machines and 15 conveyor belts. How much longer does it take the custodian to clean the conveyor belts than the dough mixing machines? So the first thing that we can do is underline the question. How much longer does it take the custodian to clean the conveyor belts than the dough mixing machines? So let's click on our blue underline and drag it up. In the question, I'm also going to highlight what is important. So we need to know how much longer does it take the custodian to clean the conveyor belts than the dough mixing machines. So we need to know about both the conveyor belts and the dough mixing machines. Now let's read the first sentence. It takes the custodian 13 minutes to clean the dough mixing machine. That is probably important, since we know that we are going to have to know about the dough mixing machines. So it takes the custodian 13 minutes to clean the dough mixing machine and 9 minutes to clean the conveyor belt. So, because we also have to know about the conveyor belt, I'm going to box that. The reason that I put a pink box instead of an orange box around when we're talking about the conveyor belt is because I noticed when I read my question, we have to know how much larger one is than the other. So we have to know about the dough mixing machine, and then we also have to know about the conveyor belt. They're two separate things. There are 7 dough mixing machines. So now we need to circle that in orange because we're talking about the dough mixing machine again. And 15 conveyor belts. Let's put that in pink since that has to do with conveyor belts. Now we need to know how much longer it takes the custodian to clean the conveyor belts than the dough mixing machines. So we know it's going to take the custodian longer to clean the conveyor belts and a shorter amount of time to clean the dough mixing machines. Let's write down our important information. We know that our problem involves dough mixing machines and conveyor belts. Remember, if at any time during this video I'm going too quickly, you can press pause to catch up. You can also rewind to hear anything again. So in our problem, what do we know about the dough mixing machine? Well, we know it takes 13 minutes to clean, while the conveyor belt takes 9 minutes to clean. And MINS period is the correct way to abbreviate minutes if you do not want to write out the whole word. What else do we know about the dough mixing machine? we know that there are 7 dough mixing machines. And you may notice that in black I wrote clean because this is how long it took them to clean, and then I wrote number here for how many there of each machine there are. So we know what's the number of conveyor belts? There are 15 conveyor belts. Is there any other important information that we need to write down? How much longer does it take the custodian to clean the conveyor belts than the dough mixing machine? So we know that it takes a little bit longer to clean the conveyor belts, so I'm going to write that down, which means that the dough mixing machine has to take a shorter amount of time. It is our job to figure out how much longer it takes to clean the conveyor belts than the dough mixing machines. So instead of just saying this is shorter and this is longer to clean, we need to know the exact amount of time in order to know how much of a difference there is. So this is where our math comes in. To find the exact amount of time, what do we have to do with 7 machines that take 13 minutes each to clean? Well, if they each take 13 minutes, we know we have equal groups. So we are not going to take 13 minutes plus 7 machines. That won't give us a time. 13 minutes minus 7 machines also will not give us a time. 13 minutes times 7 machines, that means that we would have 13 minutes for the first machine, 13 minutes for the second machine, 13 minutes for the third machine. That will work. If we multiply these, that will give us the exact amount of time. Same thing with the conveyor belts. We can multiply the minutes times the number of machines to get the exact amount of time that it takes to clean each type of machine. Now, just finding the exact amount of time for each will not answer our question. We have to know how much longer it takes for the conveyor belts. So we know the first step that we're going to do is multiplication. What is the second step in our problem that is going to tell us how much longer it takes to clean the conveyor belts? Your first idea might be to say we should compare them. But we already know that the conveyor belt takes longer because it says that in our question. It says the conveyor belts take longer than the dough mixing machines. So comparing is actually not what we're going to do. When we find how much longer something is than something else, we are comparing, but we're trying to find the difference. And when we find the difference, we are actually doing which operation? We're doing subtraction. So we're going to take our larger number, C for conveyor belts, and we're going to have to take away how much time it takes for the dough mixing machines. This will give us the difference and tell us how much longer it takes to clean the conveyor belts than the dough mixing machines. So with this in mind, we can write our equations that represent this situation. So for the dough mixing machines, we have 13 minutes times 7 equals D for the amount of time it takes to clean the dough mixing machines. Then we have the conveyor belts. They take 9 minutes each and there are 15 of them. So that we can then write 9 minutes times 15 equals the conveyor belt time. Our last step is subtracting to find the difference. We have our conveyor belts minus the dough mixing machine time, which gives us our difference. how much longer it takes to clean the dough mixing machines. I'm going to use the variable t here for time. Now let's explain your rationale for choosing the operations. Why did we choose to multiply? I'm going to think aloud before we write. I chose to multiply 13 minutes times 7 dough mixing machines because, why did we do that? What were we looking for? We were looking for the exact amount of time that it takes to clean all of the dough mixing machines. So we can say, I chose multiplication because when we multiplied the number of machines times the number of minutes, that gave us the time it took to clean each machine. Let's write. I chose multiplication because we multiply the minutes times the number of machines. That tells us the exact amount of time it takes to clean the machine. Then we chose to subtract. Why? Well, we chose to subtract. We are kind of comparing, but we're really looking for the difference. So let's write. Next, I subtracted to find the difference. Good. So does my equation represent the problem? First, we had to multiply the minutes times the number of machines, then the minutes times the number of conveyor belts, and then we took the number of conveyor belts, which is larger, because the conveyor belts took longer to clean, and we subtracted the shorter amount of time that it took to clean the dough mixing machines, and that would help us find the difference. So yes, my equation does represent the problem. Now we're going to do D. Draw a model. So write your D on your paper. You are going to solve 13 times 7 using a multiplication strategy of your choice. Then you will solve 9 times 15 using a multiplication strategy of your choice. Last, you will subtract. You will take the number of minutes that it took to clean the conveyor belts minus the number of minutes that it took to clean the mixing machines. And that will give you the difference, telling you how much longer it took the custodian to clean the conveyor belts. Pause the video so you can solve those 3 models using the models of your choice. Now we will solve the equation. You will use the same equations that you used over here, but instead of putting variables, you will write the answers that you found when you used your models. Pause the video so that you have time to write your equations. Now we will evaluate. Is my answer reasonable? So we will be looking at the answer that we got when we solved our equation. Does this amount of time tell us how much longer it takes the custodian to clean the conveyor belts than the dough mixing machines? How do we know? So we have our sentence starter here. My answer is reasonable because, and then you're going to think about, why is our answer reasonable? Why does it make sense that we first multiplied these numbers to find the exact time, then subtracted them? Go ahead and pause the video so that you are able to write why you believe your answer is reasonable. The last step we have is R, respond. Answer the question, explain your thinking if the problem asks you to. So we're going to go back up to the top and look at the question that we underlined. How much longer does it take the custodian to clean the conveyor belts than the dough mixing machines? You're going to write your answer in a sentence. It takes the custodian much longer to clean the conveyor belts than it takes to clean the dough mixing machines. Go ahead and write your answer in the quadrant that says R. Pause the video so that you can write down your answer on your paper. Now that everything is written down on our paper, you can go to the next slide and type in your answers where there is either a blue question mark or blue text. On the following slide, you do not need to draw your model because it's on your paper, or rewrite the important information as you will have annotated it above. Before you go on to the next slide to do this, I would like to talk to you about your independent work. The following slide is listed as independent work. You will solve this problem independently. Because this question asks how long does it take the custodian to sweep, mop, clean the mixing machines and the conveyor belts, you will need to use some of the information from this problem, but you will need to use the information for how much time it took to clean the mixing machines and the conveyor belts from part A. That information can be found on your paper right here. Here's the time it took to clean the conveyor belts and the time it took to clean the dough mixing machines. I hope that helps.